Katie Lam is a Conservative MP and Shadow Home Office Minister. A very good afternoon to you, Katie.
Good afternoon.
Thanks for joining us. Do you share a lot of Tom Slater's, so we say, pessimism about phase 2 of this Labour government?
I'm afraid I do. I'm sorry to say you're not going to get a much cheerier assessment from me. I think there's no reason to think that phase 2 is going to be any better than the disastrous phase 1.
Now, I have to say, I like to congratulate the Prime Minister, particularly on his birthday and on day 2, phase 2. And I mean this with all due respect to you, Katie Lam, to be an even worse government than your lot was in the final race. That's quite an achievement, isn't it?
He is definitely doing a particularly terrible job, and I take no joy in that. You know, it's of course I'm not a member of the Labour Party, but I do live here and I'm a British citizen, and I want the country to be a success, and I want the government to be a success, and unfortunately it's failing.
Well, absolutely. Well, let's talk about one of the particular policies they're failing on, and that is on immigration. That's in your area of responsibility as a Shadow Home Office Minister. This much fated one in, one out and policy. I mean, again, wasn't at all what the British people were asking for. We wanted it all out and none in, thank you very much. But they offered one in, one out, said it'd be up in a matter of weeks, still not up and running, despite the fact that some people have miraculously been detained. But since this was announced, we've had a whopping 3,500 people arrive on the Channel dinghies. God knows how many more we don't know about through other routes. And not a single person returned, and then luckily at least not a single person arriving from France. But we're told it will happen within weeks. Are you hopeful it'll ever get off the ground, and is it a policy we should be supporting?
I am unfortunately not very hopeful that it may get off the ground, but I think it would be very unlikely. It's very unlikely that it's going to be a success for a number of different reasons. You know, the devil is really in the detail on this, but sending people back to France is where they've just come from, so they're not sending them very far. What is the disincentive from them just to try again? If for every 17 people who come, 16 of them are going to get to stay, if I were running a serious organised immigration crime outfit, I would say, OK, well, no win, no fee. If you don't get to stay in the UK, if they send you back to France, we'll send you on your second journey for free. Yeah. And we don't even know yet for the deal whether we are going to have to take an asylum applicant from France every time somebody comes over. So if you're in France and you try and come here illegally once a week for a year, are we going to have to take 52 people from France for that? Yeah. I mean, this is nonsensical to me.
And indeed, a lot of the people who are coming here illegally are people that know perfectly well if there were a legal route, they wouldn't be judged to be someone who could get on it. So they're still going to be coming anyway. I think we all knew this was madness. I do still always wonder whether Keir Starmer and Yvette Cooper, the people in the Labour Party pushing this, whether they realise how mad this policy is. I mean, at least the Rwanda policy from the Tories, although it never got off the ground, and although it was on way too small a scale, at least it made sense as a sort of as a theory. What do you make of the announcements we had from the Yvette Cooper, the Home Secretary, yesterday about, rather more detail in terms of things like announcing a temporary suspension of the refugee family reunion scheme? So if you're granted asylum here, you can't now just bring your entire family with you. It's going to be a temporary bar on that. We don't know how long, but also the decision to expedite a load of students coming over on scholarships paid for by the taxpayer under a Foreign Office scheme to come here from Gaza to study in this country. What do you make of both of those policy announcements?
Well, the first one, I think, is just tiny tinkering around the edges of a system that is completely broken. I mean, the transformational change that we need to our both legal and our legal immigration system and our approach to illegal immigration, we are not getting anywhere close to under this government. They just don't seem to understand the order of magnitude of the problem. And to your second point about the student scholarships, you can see this in the things that they're still doing. Their fundamental instincts are wrong. They aren't thinking, well, what is the immigration system for? The immigration system should be to produce the best results possible for the British people and for Britain as a whole. It isn't explicitly and fundamentally a system that exists for the whole world. You know, the point of Britain is not just to be a place where people can come if they are struggling in their home countries. That's very, very sad. Lots of people around the world have really, really difficult lives. But the answer can't be that they all move here.
I wrote this in the column of The Sun last week, and a lot of people said how heartless and cruel I was. I'm like, well, how many billion do you plan to take? I've never had a clear answer from people on this about why they would draw the line at, say, 10,000 or 100,000 or a million or 100 million, because we're talking about billions of people who have worse lives and, if given the option, would rather live here than live where they live.
And it's also, I think, totally the wrong way round to think about it. The question should be, if we want to be and choose to be generous, and we have a long and proud history of doing that, how many people can we take? And you start there, you know, rather than saying the number first. You talk to local authorities. You would say, how many people can you house? How many people do you feel you can integrate into the community, into our culture? What capacity do you have for health appointments? What school place capacity do you have? And
well,
we
at that point, the answer would be zero. I would suggest that if we want to help people living in these basket case countries, we try and help them to change the basket case country they live in. I'm just not entirely sure that Europe as a whole, let alone the UK, has enough space to take in the rest of the world that is unhappy where they live. Because the thing to remember about this country, and as much as many on the left seem to sort of criticise everything about our culture and our history and what we've done in the past, is that Britain didn't just happen. We didn't just happen to end up as a, you know, OK, with all its problems, a free democracy with relative, you know, economic wealth. It didn't just happen. It was something that the British people and the culture, the philosophy and the religious background help deliver it, you know, and I don't see why we do need to share it with the rest of the world, frankly.
And fundamental things about our culture are very precious. I mean, not least our attitude to women and the way that women can live in this country and what's considered to be safety and autonomy and freedom for women. That's actually pretty rare around the world. The same is true for gay people. You know, those are fantastic elements of our culture that need not just to be celebrated, but protected. They are fragile.
Indeed. What do you make of the Labour MP Clive Lewis? He represents Norwich South, and he's claimed that some of the people, not all, but some of the people who are flying the St George's flag, the England flag, outside migrant hotels in his constituency are extremists. He says they're trying to mark territory and intimidate people. He says most people say they fly the St George's Cross out of pride, and that's probably even true for some of those putting them on lampposts. He says, but far-right groups are using these flags to mark territory and intimidate the vast majority who reject their extreme views. Do you agree?
I think everybody should be happy and proud to see the flag of their country in the country that they live in. And I think if people have a problem with that, then I think that is their problem. That's not a problem with the flag.
OK. How long do you think it's going to take the Conservatives under your leader, Kemi Badenoch, to get to the same position as, let's face it, where Reform is, where they are 35% in the polls? They're 15 points ahead of Labour even, Tories trailing behind, where they are saying, we're going to deal with the issue of immigration, and illegal and legal, but we're going to be dealing with these issues, and we are going to get out of the European Convention on Human Rights, get out of the whatever aspects of the Refugee Convention, Human Rights Act and all of that, so that we can actually remove people from this country who arrived here illegally or have stayed here illegally. How long do you think it's going to take your party to finish your reviews, to come round, do all the hand-wringing and actually get to the point where you are able to deliver a policy, as has been espoused by the Reform Party, to an awful lot of acclaim from a lot of ordinary British voters, that you will actually start dealing with one of the single biggest issues in the political agenda of this country right now?
So I think on legal migration, there actually is a lot of Conservative policy that we've already published and written up into legislation, which we've tried to propose in Parliament. But of course, the government has a large majority and they've voted it down. I think a lot of what you're talking about is illegal migration. And there is, as of course you know, there's a review that's going on at the moment into membership of the ECHR. And leaving these things is complicated because there are all of the cases that have been judged. I mean, I am on record as saying that I think the only way that we can manage our border is being outside of the ECHR. Yeah. But all of the cases that have been arbitrated in the time that we've been within the ECHR, we have to decide what happens to those, do the precedent stand, etc. So
put some lawyers in a room for 2 weeks. I'm sure they could work it out.
My sense is, I don't know, but I believe that some of those announcements will come around conference and through the autumn.
So we're all going to find out. So Nigel Farage has been stealing, a storm on this over the last few weeks, and Kemi Badenoch is going to be announcing it, or Chris Philp or whoever it is, the Shadow Home Secretary, are going to be announcing this at party conference. Why wait?
I think the position that we're in now, we're just over a year from, I believe I'm right in saying, the greatest electoral rout in British politics. I think the Conservatives in the general election of 2024 lost more seats than any sitting government ever. And to build back from that position where clearly the public has told us we're very angry with you, to build back that trust takes credibility and detail.
Yeah, again, I kind of wonder, you know, lots of people, it's their full-time job to do that detail. I'm wondering how long it takes, because lots of this stuff is basic principles. You know, you guys were in government for long enough, unable to actually, you know, deliver the Rwanda deal on time, or, you know, to actually function at all because of these things. You'd think someone might have worked it out. Let me talk about something completely different. The grooming gangs inquiry. You've done some amazing speeches in Parliament on this, and you went very viral at one point and talking about, and you were one of the people who read out the detail of some of these cases from the judge's sentencing remarks, indeed, about the horrific experiences that some of these young girls went through in terms of gang rape and the torture they actually experienced. We haven't heard anything about the grooming gang inquiry lately. Has it been set up? Has anyone been appointed? When's it starting?
Well, as far as I'm aware, there doesn't seem to have been any progress at all. We are actually having, so Chris Philp, the Shadow Home Secretary, put in an urgent question to the government about this today. That's now been converted to a statement. So we're hoping to hear from Jess Phillips. Because of Parliament, there's no exact time, but yeah. I think about 1:30, perhaps, on what the latest is. But I don't really understand the delay.
No, I mean, we're talking months now, aren't we? It's quite bizarre. And just finally, the Green Party have elected a brand new leader, Zach Polanski, this morning. He apparently is quite open to the idea of, you know, working with other parties, particularly Jeremy Corbyn as our Sultana's new party, the Your Party. We've also seen some of the Gaza, MPs for Gaza, which is what they are effectively, saying that they'd be willing to work with Jeremy Corbyn's party. How hopeful are you and the Tories that while your vote is being stolen a lot by reform and that split on the right, that actually Labour are going to be seeing a big split on the left and could also be damaged?
Well, I think one of the things that people underestimate or sometimes forget thinking about the current cabinet is that lots of them have very small majorities. You know, somebody like Wes Streeting, the health secretary, only won his seat by a few hundred votes. And I think actually the same is true of Jess Phillips, whom we were just talking about.
So I think Angela Rayner as well, the Deputy Prime Minister. That's why she might be buying a new home near Brighton.
Well, and that pressure is already there, and I think it is appropriate to ask what effect that is having on policymaking and how the government is running the country.
OK. Would you welcome Zach Polanski to his new job?
Oh, well, I mean, he's been democratically elected, and congratulations to him. But I suspect he and I won't agree on very much.
Katie Lam, Shadow Home Office Minister, thank you very much indeed for that. Coming back to Tom Slater, who spiked online listening to that. I mean, Katie Lam, I think she's actually a rather good operator. She's done some, especially on the grooming gang. She's been very impressive in Parliament, holding the government to account. But whenever you talk to the Conservatives on a lot of the issues we talked about, you know, net zero earlier, and when we talk about immigration, you're just sitting there thinking, I mean, she wasn't in government then, but there's litany of failure on the part of the Conservatives. I mean, I don't think there's anyone who's going, oh, OK, yeah, well, we definitely will trust them on this, especially as they are coming sort of creeping, crawling bit by bit, reluctantly dragged towards, let's face it, probably on some basis suspending or leaving the ECHR, the Refugee Convention, but they don't really want to do it. And I don't think voters are going to think they've got their hearts in it.
There is that. I think it was probably pretty clear since the drubbing of last year and after the leadership election that in terms of policy, I think you could see where things were going. They were going to become more net zero sceptical. They were going to become more ECHR sceptical, if not actually pulling out of it. But I think there's a couple of different things going on, one of which is that no one is really going to listen to anything the Tories have to say for a while yet. I think that's fair to say. They're just not really on the field.
Speeches, they barely even make it onto the front page.
And to be brutally frank, I think that would be true regardless of who was leader. There's been a lot of kind of twitchiness, a lot of talk about maybe Robin Jenrick's the answer. I think they would be in exactly the same position. I think if they, you know, they could, it doesn't matter which leader they pick, they're going to have the same problem. I also think a lot of this kind of slowly getting towards the position is partly about internal party management as much as it is anything else. If Kemi Badenoch or, you know, had gone into that leadership election saying, you know what, we're going to pull out the ECHR next Tuesday, that would have frightened the...
She wouldn't have been elected.
The Lib Dem aspect of the
but isn't that part of the problem? And that's the thing. So even even when people thought they'd elected a sort of a Brexiteer, quite sensible sort of government in 2019 under Boris Johnson, they didn't get that, because actually a lot of people, although they had to say they were Brexit, or they had to say they support various policies, they didn't really mean it, which is why they weren't querying a lot of things that Boris Johnson was doing, and we didn't actually get the government that people thought they voted for.
Oh, no, absolutely. I mean, one thing you probably can say about the Conservative Party, and this even goes for the pretty much should be in the Lib Dems kind of characters that you might see from time to time, is that they do have a capacity for opportunism and intellectual flexibility
and reinvention.
That often you don't see.
The
in
the most successful political party in the whole of Europe.
It's one of the things that stood them in good stead. So maybe that some of them will notice which way the wind is blowing on a lot of these issues.
But again, I think it's an element now. The problems are so entrenched and so difficult to deal with that actually you need people who not just are competent and able to do it. And again, there's a big question mark over Tory competence now. So when you're going, reform, yes, but I might agree with them, but will they be competent enough? People go, you don't agree with the Tories, and we know they're not competent because look what they did in office. So many mistakes on that, on policy and delivery as well. But that line from Nigel Farage, which the Tories are a broad church, but a broad church with no religion. That is good. I think that does stick in a lot of people's minds.
Oh no, absolutely. I think that's probably starting to change. I think they're kind of starting to recognise that if they want to reconnect with voters, that they can't go sort of half measures on a lot of these questions, particularly immigration, but I think the environmental issues can become more and more important, especially as people start to feel like the political parties on offer are giving them permission to kind of voice their discontent, and giving them options, I should say. But there's still loads of questions about where the Tory party are going to position themselves in relation to reform. They seem quite keen to attack them on questions of fiscal and general economic credibility. But if you think about the kind of state that they left the government and its finances in, made much worse by Keir Starmer and Rachel Reeves, but nevertheless it was hardly looking rosy. I think that's going to be difficult for them. So who knows what happens.